I have said the same sentence to strangers since 1987. They come in with a folder and a certainty. Somebody died, and they are holding the paperwork, and they want to arrange things. And 4 or 5 times a year, I have to take my glasses off and say it. That document does not let you do this. I said it kindly. I said it to daughters and to sons, and once to a man who had driven 11 hours. And I always let them sit with it for a minute before I said anything else. In August, I sat at my own kitchen table and read a copy of a form I signed at 2 in the morning in an emergency department, and I said it aloud, to nobody at all, in a house with nobody in it. My name is Frank Botello. I am 76 years old, and for 38 of those years, I was a funeral director in this town. If somebody in your family has started handling things for you, stay with me. Subscribe to True to See It Stories, and I will tell you all of it, from the first form to the last one. Let me start with the work, because the work is the whole thing. Botello and Sons, Ashworth Falls, Massachusetts. My father opened it in '51. I came in '69, and I sold it in 2016. People think a funeral director spends his day with the dead. He does not. He spends it with the living, at a table, at the worst hour of their lives, going through paper. That is the job. Somebody dies and a mountain of paper comes due at the exact moment nobody in the room can read. Death certificate, burial permit, cemetery deed, and the insurance. The veterans discharge papers if there are any, and there usually are, and they are usually in a drawer nobody's has opened since the man's mother died. And in the middle of that folder, 4 or 5 times a year, there is a document somebody is holding like a key. They say, I have power of attorney. And I say, may I see it? And a certain number of times, what they hand me is not a power of attorney. It is a healthcare proxy. This is the whole story, and it does not need dressing up. A healthcare proxy appoints a person to make medical decisions for you if you cannot make them yourself. Do we operate? Do we treat? Do we keep going? That is all it does. It is a medical instrument. It has no authority over money. None. There is no page in it about money, and the reason there is no page is not that somebody left it out. It is that a proxy is not that kind of form. A durable power of attorney is the other one. That is the one that moves money. 2 documents, 2 different words on the front. And I would say that most people who have signed one of them could not tell you tomorrow which one it was. I know that because I watched it. 38 years, at a table, in the worst hour, with the folder open between us. Now my family. Rosalie and I were married 46 years. She died in 2021, in March, at home, and I did not direct that one. I had sold the firm by then, and I sat in a pew like everybody else, and I am still not sure I did it right. We had 2 children, Nadine, who is 49, and Gil, once, and then I leave it alone. It is not what this story is about, and it has never improved from being handled. Gil died in 1994. He was 19, and I directed my own son's funeral. Nobody made me. Nobody would have. I did it because at 45 I could not sit in a pew and watch another man do it badly, and I have never once been certain whether that was a reason or just a way of not being in the room. I can tell you the temperature that day. I can tell you the order of the cars. I cannot tell you one thing Rosalie said to me that week, not one. And she is gone now, so I cannot ask her. That is the wound, and I am putting it here at the front so you know what kind of man is telling you this. Nadine married Craig Salvo in 2002. Craig gets fairness at the start. Without it, you will not believe me at the end. He is a big, easy man. He remembers names. At Rosalie's wake, he stood at the door for 4 hours and greeted people and did it well, and I was grateful, and I told him so. He worked in medical equipment sales, and then in what he called senior placement, which as far as I could ever tell, meant he took a fee for steering families toward one care home rather than another. I did not like that. I never said so. Their granddaughter is Tessa. She is 22, works the overnight desk at a hotel out by the highway, and she has read me the obituaries out loud on Sunday mornings since she was 9 years old. That's because she was a slow reader, and the obituaries are the only part of the paper with short paragraphs. I never hurried her. Nobody else in her life had the patience, and I had 38 years of practice at sitting still while somebody worked their way through something difficult. I knew half the names. I would say what I remembered, and she would wait and then read the next one. We still do it. She is 22 and we still do it, and neither of us has ever once mentioned that we do it. And then there is my sister, Aldina Dina. She is 81, 5 years older than me, and she has dementia. She has had it since 2018. By 2022, she could not be at home, and I put her in Cedar Brook, which is a memory care residence out on Route 9, and which is very good and very expensive. $13,000 a month. I could pay it because in 2014, when Dina was still Dina, the two of us sat down with a lawyer and set up a trust. Her half of our mother's house, her savings, and a piece of what I got when I sold the firm. $214,000, and it was irrevocable, and I was the trustee. I want you to hear why we did it that way. We did it that way because I had watched families for 38 years, and I knew exactly how this goes when there is money sitting loose and somebody gets tired. I built the fence myself. I am telling you that so you understand that what happened next did not happen to a fool. In March, Craig and Nadine lost their house on Ridge Street. It was not dramatic. They had refinanced twice. Craig's income had gone strange, and the bank took it. And I had 4 bedrooms and one of me. So they moved in, and I was glad. That is the truth of it. I was 76, and I had been eating standing up at the counter for 2 years, and suddenly there were people in the house, and the television was on in the evening. Nadine cooked. Craig fixed the back door that had been sticking since Rosalie died. That was March. That was the trap. And it was not a trap anybody said. It was just the situation, sitting there, waiting for somebody to notice what it was good for. April. I was on the stairs in the afternoon, and I could not find the word for stairs. I knew what they were. I knew what they were for. I stood there with my hand on the rail and reached for the word the way you reach into a drawer, and the drawer was empty. It lasted about 20 minutes. Craig drove me to the emergency department. He was good about it. He was calm, and he did not make a fuss, and he stayed. They said, transient ischemic attack. A little stroke that undoes itself. They kept me overnight, and at 2 in the morning a nurse came in with a clipboard. Everybody asks about this part. 4 months of turning it over, and it went exactly like this. She was not doing anything wrong. It is a standard thing. You come in over a certain age, alone, and they want a proxy on file, so that if you go off a cliff at 4 in the morning, there is somebody to call. She said, "Do you have a healthcare proxy on file with us?" I said no. She said, "Would you like to name someone?" I said, "My son-in-law is outside," and she went and got him, and Craig came in and stood at the end of the bed, and I signed it. And I knew what I was signing. I was not confused. A TIA 9 hours earlier, and I was tired, but I was not confused. Whatever Craig spent September telling people. I signed a healthcare proxy naming Craig Salvo as my agent. That is exactly what I meant to do. If I go off a cliff at 4 in the morning, somebody has to answer the telephone, and Nadine falls apart, and Tessa was 19. I did the right thing. I did it on purpose. And I did not read the second page, because I have read 400 of these, and I know what is on the second page. Nothing. That is what is on the second page of a healthcare proxy where the financial powers would be in the other document. Nothing. Because it is not that form. I came home on a Tuesday. Craig drove. And then for 4 months nothing happened. Nobody tells you about the 4 months of nothing. Nadine made a pot roast on Sundays. Craig took my recycling out. In June, we all went to Tessa's cousin's graduation, and Craig took a photograph of me with the girls. And it is a good photograph, and it is still on the refrigerator. I visited Dina on the second Saturday of the month, which is what I had done for 3 years. In June, she knew me for about 4 minutes. She called me by my father's name, which she does, and I let her, because correcting her is for my benefit and not for hers. I did not visit in July. No sliding past that one. The second Saturday of July was the 12th, and I had a summer cold, and I told myself I would go the following week, and then I did not go the following week either. She was moved on the 3rd of July. August the 11th, a Monday. The telephone rang at 9:20 in the morning. It was Denise Faria, who works the front desk at the funeral home. I hired her in 2004. She was 26 and terrified, and she is now 50 and runs that building better than I ever did. She said, "Frank, this is probably nothing. I have been in this business my whole life." When somebody says this is probably nothing in that particular voice, it is not nothing. She said Craig had come in on Friday. He had asked what would be involved in moving Rosalie's pre-need arrangement to a different provider, and whether it could be done by an agent rather than by me, and he had asked it twice, in 2 different ways. And Denise had said she would have to check, and she had walked him out, and then she had sat at her desk all weekend, and on Monday morning she called me. I said, "Thank you, Denise." She said, "Frank, are you all right?" And I said yes, and I hung up, and I sat in the kitchen for about 10 minutes. What I did next is the only part of this I am actually proud of. I did nothing. I did not go and find Craig. I did not call Nadine. I did not say one word in that house. I sat down, and I made a list of what I knew, which was almost nothing, and a list of what I could check without asking anybody's permission. 38 years at a table with grieving families teaches you one thing above everything else. Do not argue with a person who is holding a document. Read the document. On Tuesday, I called Sable Trust and asked for a statement on my sister's trust. The young man on the telephone was polite, and then he was uncomfortable, and then he said he would have to call me back. He called back in about 40 minutes with somebody senior on the line, and the senior person asked me, carefully, whether I knew that somebody else was running my sister's money now. I said, "Tell me about that." There was a form on file, signed on the 22nd of May, putting Craig Salvo in my place, and attached to it, as the authority, a copy of a document. I asked him to read me the title at the top of that document, and he read it out. Healthcare proxy. I did not say anything for a moment. He said, "Sir, are you still there?" I said, "Is there a second page?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Is there anything on it?" And there was a pause, a real one, 4 or 5 seconds, and he said, "I would have to look at the file." That was the moment, not the money. Right there, on a Tuesday morning in August, on the telephone, when a man whose job is to hold documents told me he would have to look at the file, because I already knew what was on the second page. Nothing. There is no financial powers clause in a healthcare proxy. It is not defective. It is not incomplete. There is no such section because a proxy appoints somebody to say yes or no to a surgeon. $214,000 had moved on a form that cannot move a dollar. And it had moved because a man at a trust company looked at a signature and a notary stamp and never turned the page. I got a copy in the post on Thursday. I read it 11 times. And on Friday, I drove out to Cedar Brook to see my sister. The woman at the desk was new, and she was pleasant, and she looked for a long time at her screen. She said, "Mr. Botello, I am showing that Aldina was discharged on the 3rd of July. I said, "Discharged to where?" She said, "I am not able to tell you that." I said, "I am her brother." And she said, very kindly, that the contact of record was Craig Salvo, and that she was not able to release the information to me. Stay on that a moment, because I had to, in a parking lot, with the engine off. 4.5 months. Every day since the 3rd of July, I had known where my sister was. I would have told you the room number. Room 14, then. The one with the window onto the courtyard, and she liked to sit where she could see the birds. And every day since the 3rd of July I had been wrong. Do not be careful with me here. I was not careful with myself. I sat in that car for a long time. I got the address on Monday, and I got it the way anybody gets anything in a town like this, which is that I called somebody I have known for 30 years. The state has a registry. Care homes are licensed, and the licenses are public, and a person who knows what to ask for can be told where a resident was transferred. But I did not even need that in the end, because when I heard the address, I did not need anybody to explain it to me. 41 Pratt Street. I have been to 41 Pratt Street. In 2009, in November, in the rain, at about 11 at night, I collected a gentleman named Aurelio Pinto from that house. I remember it because the front step was bad and we had to bring him out the side, and because the woman who ran it stood in the kitchen doorway the entire time with her arms folded and never said one word to us. It was a rest home then, licensed for 6 beds. General residential care. I know that because I filed the paperwork on Mr. Pinto, and the level of care goes on the form, and in 38 years I filed several thousand of those forms, and the ones from the houses stay with you, more than the ones from the hospitals. 6 beds, general care, and that is the whole of it. Not memory care. Memory care is a separate authorization, and it is a different building standard, and it is not a thing you get by accident. My sister has advanced dementia and cannot be left alone with a stove. So, on that Monday I was standing in my kitchen holding 2 facts. 1. The document that moved the money is a healthcare proxy, and there is nothing on its second page. 2. My sister is in a 6-bed general care house on Pratt Street, and I have been inside it. And nobody could take either of those away from me, because they were both already in my head. I talked to Craig that night. I had to. I had to know what he would say. He was very good. He did not get angry. He got sad. He said, "Frank, sit down. I have been trying to find the right time." He said Cedar Brook was $13,000 a month, and the trust would have been finished in under 2 years. And then what? He said Yvonne's place is 4,000, and it is small, and it is home-like, and Dina is calmer in a small place, and he had researched it carefully, which given what he did for a living, I suppose was true in some technical sense. He said he had used the document I gave him, and he had used it because I gave it to him, and he said that in the tone of a man who has been unfairly accused, and Nadine was standing at the counter with a dish towel nodding. I did not expect that. My daughter, 49 years old, nodding along. She never drove out there. It is 11 minutes. 11 minutes from my kitchen to Pratt Street, and she never once got in a car. I said, "All right, Craig." And I went up to bed, and I lay there, and I understood that I was going to have to do this alone. I got in to see Dina on the 28th of August. I got in because I told Yvonne Dacey on the telephone that I was a retired funeral director, and I was calling about pre-arrangements for a resident, which is the sort of call a woman running a house like that gets, and does not want to have in front of anybody, and takes in person. That is the only lie I told in this entire business, and I would tell it again. The house is a raised ranch, aluminium siding, side door, and the front step is still bad. There were 11 people in it. I counted. That is what I did while she was talking to me in the front room. I counted, because counting is what I know how to do in a building. 11 people in a house licensed for 6. 2 in the front room in front of a televisions that was showing a shopping channel with the sound off. 3 at the kitchen table. 4 in the 2 rooms off the back hall, which I could see into. 2 more upstairs, which I heard. and my sister was in a room off the kitchen that used to be a pantry. There is no window in that room. She was in a chair with a tray table across the front of it, and she could not get out of the chair, and she was asleep at 11 o'clock in the morning. Her hair had been cut short. Not badly, just short. The way you cut hair when you do not want to deal with it. And she had a pressure sore on her left heel. I am not going to describe it. I will tell you that I have been around the bodies of a great many old people, and I know exactly what one of those looks like at every stage, and I know how long it takes to get there. It takes weeks. I stood in a windowless pantry, looking at my sister asleep in the middle of the morning, with a wound on her heel that had been developing for weeks, and something in me changed over completely. Up to that morning, this had been about a trust. It had been a paper problem, and I am a paper man, and I had been going about it in a paper way. Careful. Slow. Correct. And I understood standing there that every day I spent being careful was another day she was in that chair. That is the difference between a theft and what this actually was. Yvonne Dacey came and stood in the doorway, with her arms folded, exactly the way she had in 2009, and she said she's comfortable. And then she said the other thing, and it has stayed exactly where she left it. She said she doesn't know where she is anyway. Craig had said the same sentence in my kitchen the week before, to Nadine, with me in the next room. Tessa was on the stairs. I was barred from the house on the 2nd of September. Yvonne called me. She was not unpleasant. She said she had spoken to the family and that visits were family only and that the family contact on file was Craig Salvo. And there it was, all the way around. He held the proxy. The proxy made him the contact. The contact decided who was family, and I was not family. Understand where that leaves a man. I could not go to the police with a document because the police do not read trust instruments, and the first thing anybody would say is that this is a family matter and it belongs in probate court. I could not go to the trust company because I am not the trustee. That was the entire point of what he filed. And I am 76 years old, and I had a small stroke in April. And Craig had already used the word confused about me twice in front of his wife. What I had was one sheet of paper, and the place on it where nothing is written. And one thing I know how to do, which is get somebody who is paid to read a document to actually read it. I made a decision in the first week of September, and I am not proud of this one either. I stopped fighting. Out loud, in the house, I gave up. I told Craig at dinner that I had thought about it, and that he was probably right about the money. That $13,000 a month was never going to hold, and that I did not have the strength for it. And then I said, while we are getting things in order, I want you on Rosalie's pre-need as well. Get it all in one place. I do not want Nadine dealing with 2 different companies when the time comes. You should have seen his face. He wanted that badly. Not for the money. There is barely any money in a pre-need. He wanted it because a man who hands you another document is a man who is not going to make trouble. On Sunday, the 14th of September, he brought the whole folder to the kitchen table to show me. Everything was in order. He laid it out. All of it. The trust instrument, the acceptance, the notarized proxy, the Cedar Brook discharge, the agreement with Dacey. And then his phone rang, and it was work, and he went out to the driveway to take it. 11 minutes. I photographed every page. 41 pages. I did it with the telephone Tessa set up for me, and I did it standing up, and my hands were steady, which surprised me. The last thing I photographed was page 2 of the healthcare proxy. A blank page with a header and a line for initials, and nothing else on it at all. That photograph is the whole case. A blank page. Tessa drove out to Pratt Street on Tuesday the 16th at 9 in the morning. She works nights. Everybody in that house assumed she was asleep, which is the useful thing about a 22-year-old on a hotel desk. She did not go in. She parked across the road, and she counted people through the front window over about 40 minutes, and she wrote the number on the back of a receipt, 11. Then she photographed the license, which by law is displayed, and which is in a frame in the front hall, and can be read from the step. 6 beds, residential care, no dementia authorization. About my granddaughter, I did not ask her to do that. I told her what I knew on a Sunday morning after the obituaries because she is the only person in that family I could tell. And she said, "What do you need?" Not, "Is this a good idea?" Not, "Are you sure?" She was 22 and nobody had told her yet that you are supposed to give up. I have turned that over more times than I have turned over anything else in this. What we sent and to whom. If you take one thing out of this, take this. We did not send it all to one place. We sent 3 different things to 3 different people, and each one of them only had to care about their own small piece. To Sable Trust, to the people who checked documents, and not to Pettit, the man who had accepted it. 2 pages. The acceptance and page 2 of the proxy. And 1 sentence. Please confirm what financial authority the attached instrument conveys. That is all. No accusation. No story about my family. One question that a man whose whole job is reading cannot leave unanswered in writing. To the state licensing office. Tessa's photograph of the license, her count, the date, and the address. 6 beds, 11 people, 2 with dementia, named. To the office that looks after adults at risk, a description of my sister's heel, and the date I saw it, and the fact that I am a retired funeral director and have some idea what I was looking at. 3 envelopes, 3 small questions. Not one big story about a son-in-law. Because a big story about a son-in-law is a family matter, and every one of those offices has a drawer for family matters. Sable Trust froze the account on Tuesday the 11th of November. They did not tell me. I found out afterwards. What happens when people like that get a question in writing they cannot answer comfortably is always the same. They stop everything and they start reading. Lawrence Pettit had accepted the acceptance in May without opening the attachment. He said so. There was no money in it for him. He was busy. It had a notary stamp, and the cover letter said, "Power of attorney," even though the document did not. The licensing inspector arrived at 41 Pratt Street, unannounced on Wednesday the 12th. She counted 11, and Craig was arrested at his desk on Thursday the 14th of November, and by then he was the 3rd thing to fall, not the 1st, and that is exactly how I wanted it. Because if they had come for Craig first, it would have been a family dispute. Now for what you actually stayed for. They got nothing, not $1 of it. The trustee change was void. Not challenged, not litigated for 2 years. Void, because the paper it stood on gives no authority over money at all, and the trust company's own checkers put that in writing in about 9 days. Craig Salvo got 6 years, and restitution he will never finish paying. He fought it. He got a good lawyer and he fought it for 11 months, and I sat through most of it. The moment I will keep is not the sentence. It is a Tuesday in the spring, at a table, when his own lawyer asked him whether he had read the 2nd page of the proxy, and Craig said he did not think it mattered which form it was. He said it out loud, in a room, and then he heard himself say it. I watched him understand it, that he had never once had the advantage he thought he had, not for a single day of those 4 months, because the paper was dead the morning he filed it. Lawrence Pettit was dismissed and barred. He never took a cent, and he lost his career anyway, and I have thought about him more than I expected to. Sable Trust reviewed everything he had touched, and found 2 more. One of them was a woman in Fall River that nobody had asked about in 2 years. I do not know her name. I think about her. Yvonne Dacey lost the license, and the house closed. The 11 were placed in 9 days. The state opened her 2nd property in Somerset, and I understand there were 14 people in that one. Dina came back to Cedar Brook on the 22nd of November. Room 9, not 14. It has the window onto the courtyard. Her heel took until February. She does not know any of this happened. She never will. She calls me by my father's name, and I let her. Nadine. She was not charged. She signed nothing, and she took nothing, and she did not know about the proxy, or the trust, or the pantry. She just never drove the 11 minutes. She told me in the spring that she had believed him the whole time, and that it had never once occurred to her to go and look. I think she understood it in that courtroom on the same afternoon he did, about 4 rows apart, and neither of them looked at the other. She lives in Taunton now. We speak. She calls on Sundays and we talk about the weather and about Tessa, and there is a thing at the bottom of it that neither of us goes near. I do not blame her the way you might think. I blame her the way you blame somebody for a thing they did not do rather than a thing they did, which turns out to be a much quieter kind of blame, and it lasts longer. She has driven out to see Dina every week since December. Every week. I know because I check the visitor book, and I check the visitor book because I am not a better man than this story makes me sound. Tessa is 23. She left the hotel desk, and she is at the community college doing something with health administration, which she says is unrelated, and which is obviously not unrelated. She comes on Sundays, and she reads me the obituaries. She still does it in the same voice she used when she was 9, going slightly slower at the names, and I still say what I remember about the ones I knew, and neither of us has ever mentioned that we do it. On the 14th of November, she read 11 names out loud to a woman from the state, off a list, in that voice. The hearse is finished. 1968 Cadillac, the first car my father bought for the firm, and it had been on blocks in my garage, under a tarpaulin, since the March Rosalie died. I got the engine back in it in September, because I was waiting on other people to read things, and there was nothing else to do with my hands at 11 at night. It runs. It is correct. The chrome took me until January, and I have nowhere to drive it. I sold the firm. I am not licensed to carry anybody, and a hearse is the one car in the world you cannot take out for a pleasant afternoon. It runs and it has nowhere to go, and both of those are true, and I sit in it sometimes in the garage with the door up. Now, the thing that is yours and not mine. The paper that empties a family is almost never the one anybody argued over. It is the ordinary one, signed in a hurry, while something worse was happening in the same room. Mine was signed at 2 in the morning by a man who had just had a small stroke, in front of a nurse who was doing her job properly, and most people cannot tell you which of the two documents they signed. A healthcare proxy appoints somebody to make medical decisions if you cannot make them yourself. It has no authority over your money. There is no page about money in it. A durable power of attorney is the other one. That is the one that moves money. They are not the same form, they are not the same word, and the difference is everything. What to do this week, and it takes about 20 minutes. Find out which one you have signed, not what you think you signed. Go and look at the top of the page and read the title. If you have a proxy and you thought you had a power of attorney, you have less protection than you think, and you should know that. If you have a power of attorney and you thought it was only about doctors, you have given somebody more than you meant to, and you should know that too. And then turn to the second page, whichever one it is, and read what is on it. I spent 38 years telling other people's families that a document does not do what they think it does. In August, I said it about my own family, at my own table, with nobody in the house to hear it. Craig will be paying restitution for the rest of his life, and Daisy lost her license and will never hold another one. All of it decided by a blank page. Turn the page over. That is all. It is the cheapest thing in this entire story, and it is the only part of it that would have stopped any of it. If this stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to True Deceits Stories. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from today. There will be a new one next week.